Hello, everyone,
Hi.
and warmly welcome to our webinar on positive psychology for difficult times.
I'm going to make sure here that I have the chat window open as well. And please feel free to comment and say hi on the chat so we know you guys are there. And you can, for example, tell where you're from. So we'll see who all we have here or from where.
Yes, we would love to hear who we have online tonight, and thank you so much for joining us. So today we have the topic of positive psychology for difficult times. And do you, Netta, want to talk a little bit about why we chose this topic?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think during these times that we're living at the moment, it's definitely been a topic that people are asking about. And I think also when it comes to positive psychology, there are still a lot of kind of like misinformation about what positive psychology actually is, and if we are able to get some like help or tips or whatever when it comes to adversity and difficult times, because it might be viewed as something like you only focus on positivity and positive emotions and so on. But our students, our clients, they quite often send us messages about how much help they have from positive psychology and how it can help them to flourish even during difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that both of us, right, your same opinion, would also say, like when we are asked a question that, okay, what do you benefit the most out of positive psychology, or what does it bring to you? What kind of situations is it beneficial in? And I think pretty much every time my answer is that even though it's like great and amazing how much it gives to this everyday life, and like, for example, just that when it comes to your family or just everyday regular life, if it's work or hobbies or relationships or whatever, you can start focusing more on what's going well and what's good in people, what's good in your life. But especially when it comes to these difficult times, challenges, sorrow, no matter if we talk about losing somebody or like breakups, or if it's this kind of very difficult situations that we might experience even globally as a whole, like the pandemic has been, or our war situation, like what's going on in Europe right now in Ukraine, and it's affecting obviously many other places as well. It's definitely something that we can use in these difficult situations, the science of positive psychology, and especially the tools that we get from there. And those are the ones that we want to, or some of them, there are so many, we chose 3 for tonight that we want to share with you guys.
And hello to everyone in the chat. Thank you for telling us from where you are. Quite many people from Finland here. And then there was at least Caroline from Sweden as well. Warmly welcome to you all. But I definitely agree with what you say. Maybe one of the biggest things I think I have gotten from positive psychology is the ability to give more space to also those uncomfortable emotions and be able to listen to them and what they have to say and then act accordingly. But I'm going to put up our slides here next so we can get on with our material for tonight.
And while you do it, there's one more thing I want to lift up from positive psychology and what you just said, because there's something called negativity bias. And we people have very much needed this bias, because like if we think way back and you go like to the forest and there's like a huge bear that comes, or whatever kind of animal, it's so important that your body and mind reacts immediately, that there's a threat, and like you focus on the kind of negative, unpleasant emotion and experience. You feel fear and you are able to do something about it. And that's a huge reason for why we people still are here, and we needed it for survival. But unfortunately, this negativity bias, for many of us, maybe not all of us as much, but for many of us, it still causes this kind of thing that when we experience unpleasant, we don't like to talk about negative emotions. We rather call them unpleasant emotions because they are so important for our life and flourishing. But unpleasant emotions, unpleasant events, just like bad versus good. So bad, negative, unpleasant is usually experienced as stronger, and we very easily focus on that. And when it comes to adversity, difficult times, it's like understandable and it's even needed. And we don't say that you should always like start changing, for example, sadness into something positive. But the science shows, our experience shows that there are a lot of situations where the fact that you know you have tools how to strengthen the more positive side as well can bring you so much resilience and help to face those situations. And we are going to talk about the fact that you can both flourish and have very difficult times at the same time.
So let's see what we have on the menu for tonight. First of all, as Netta mentioned, we're going to go through 3 different tools or 3 viewpoints about using positive psychology during difficult times. And we also have saved some space for discussion and questions, so please feel free to ask questions and share your own thoughts and experiences in the chat. We are very happy to share thoughts and also hear your thoughts during this hour that we have together here.
I'm trying my best to pick up all the questions, but we'll leave some space in the end, and we will try here during the time as well. But it might also be that you guys are already like kind of responding to each other in the chat. So just warmly welcome to write there, because usually the discussions can be really good. And then if we don't have time to take all the questions, feel free to always also contact us later on as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then at the end, we're going to really shortly talk about how you can develop positive psychology skills and what kind of things Joylab has to offer regarding that. So a short introduction: who are we and why are we here tonight talking about this topic? My name is Pauliina Piippo and I'm the co-founder of Joyla. And as I said, positive psychology has really brought me, I think, quite a lot of skills, especially for these difficult times. And one of my other favorites is also self-compassion, that we are going to talk about tonight as well.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorites as well. And my name is Netta Lehtonen and I'm the other co-founder of Joyla. And what Joyla does and what Joyla is, we are a training and consultancy company representing the third wave of positive psychology. So we also want to bring these aspects of positive psychology and like the darker side of life, but also not just the individual perspective, but as well us as communities and like a whole. We have introduced a wide-ranging opportunity to study positive psychology in Finland, and through that we now are Finland's most popular trainer in positive psychology. And we have thousands of satisfied customers, and we have provided this kind of webinars and lectures and different types of free information and methods for tens of thousands of people. And really, really happy and excited to share this in English as well. Mm-hmm. And we have several training options available, and we will very briefly shortly talk about them in the end of this webinar.
And here is our mission at Joyla, because we want to create a flourishing future, and we believe that this can be created together. So our vision is to make the world a more flourishing place, and we want to spread reliable, scientifically proven information and tools regarding holistic well-being to both individuals and organizations. And as Netta mentioned, also we want to share it to communities as well, and not just focus on the individual level.
And here is a picture of me and Pauliina with Martin Seligman, who is a professor of psychology at University of Pennsylvania, and he's the founder and director of Positive Psychology Center. He is often referred to as one of the father figures of positive psychology. And therefore, we wanted to bring his definition on what positive psychology is. And he says that positive psychology is about the meaning of those happy and unhappy moments, the tapestry they wave, and the strengths and virtues they display that make up the quality of your life. And so here you see there are both these happy and unhappy moments, and like said, these unhappy or unpleasant emotions and moments and things that occur are part of our flourishing. What's the word?
Inevitable.
Inevitably, because it's just something that we all face in life. And this is his definition. The definitions, there are many of them. There might be some of you who know more about positive psychology, and some maybe are hearing about it for the first time. But we hope that after this webinar, you kind of get a picture on what it is as a whole. But here, when he talks about the quality of your life, positive psychology could also kind of be described as the psychology of a good life, and it studies like what is good about people, but also life in general.
And here we have Joyla's frame of flourishing. And this model represents things that scientifically have been proven to affect our flourishing and our well-being the most. And one of the inspirations for this model is Mr. Seligman's PERMA model. And also we have gained a lot of inspiration from our own professors at University of East London, for example, Ita Ibzan and Tim Lomas and so on. But since the beginning, since we started Joyla, we wanted to create this model through which we could spread this information of positive psychology as far as possible. And it consists of 6 different areas, and we're going to go through 3 of them a little bit more specifically tonight. But just really shortly, first of all, we have positivity here, but as Netta mentioned, also these uncomfortable emotions have an important effect on our life and on our well-being, and they have an important role as well. So it's about emotional intelligence and also prioritizing positivity. And then we have engagement, and you might know this feeling when you're really enjoying what you're doing and it feels like time goes by and you really, you're maybe at your best also in that moment. And in that moment, you might be experiencing something called the flow state, or maybe work engagement in the work environment. And strengths, and using your strengths, knowing your strengths is something that is really firmly related to this, because when you know your strengths and use them, you can experience up to 6 times more engagement. So that is the second area of the model. And the third area is relationships. And actually, according to research, this is the most important area regarding our well-being. So having authentic and meaningful connections is hugely important for our flourishing and for our well-being, and something that also has been challenged during these pandemic times, because we haven't been able to be in contact with our other people in the same way as before. And maybe now we're slowly getting back to maybe not the same as before, but maybe a new kind of normal, and trying to find our way in this world again.
And then maybe the second most, research is showing that this might be the second most important aspect, but also very tied, goes together with relationships often. This is called meaning. And when we talk about meaning, we talk about what is meaningful in your life or work, for example. And this is one thing that we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And then we have accomplishment. There are things like resilience, goals, mindsets, and one of our favorites, which is self-compassion. And also, like Paulina mentioned, going to talk a bit more about that later. And then last but not least, there's vitality, the mind and body connection. and also health in general. And it's thinking about emotions, for example, we know that emotions can be very physical and you can experience them in your body and so on. So we think it's extremely important to have it here in this frame. And this is Joel's frame of flourishing, but it could also be called a frame of resilience. So all of these different aspects have to do with resilience, and that is something is very much needed when it comes to these difficult, challenging times.
So how can positive psychology help us, and how can we benefit from it in the face of adversity? Well, first of all, as Netta already mentioned, adversity is a normal part of life. We're all gonna experience unpleasant emotions, unpleasant events. We cannot simply escape them completely. So all of us go through more difficult times in our lives. And these adversities come in various forms. They can be internal adversities or maybe external challenges. As we have seen now on a really global scale, also these kinds of external challenges like a pandemic or global warming or these kinds of really hard things that we are facing as a humankind together. And there are things we can affect and also things that we cannot affect. So, for example, right now with this war going on in Ukraine, of course, we can all do our own little part to try to help, but we cannot really affect what is actually going on over there. But we can try our best to do maybe a small part here, close to home. And there are predictable situations, and also there are sudden crises that we maybe cannot foresee at all. But all of these are situations that require resilience, and if we already, maybe even before facing these kinds of circumstances, if we strengthen our resilience muscles, we might be able to bounce back better when we encounter these difficult times. But of course, also when we are living through these difficult times, there are many ways that we can strengthen our resilience.
And Satu has a great question here. Is there some meaning why the nature is not on the list? Thanks for this very important question. The nature would be extremely high on my list, and it's definitely there. So it doesn't have its own part in this frame of flourishing, but when it comes to vitality, there are so many studies about benefits of nature. When we talk about what brings you positive emotions, nature is very often there for many people. When it comes to meaning in life, nature can be a huge aspect. And when we experience, for example, this kind of moments of awe that have to do with meaning, nature can be involved in many of those. So it's there, but not mentioned specifically. It could be. And maybe this question brings me to the point also regarding the frame, that we just like mentioned a few of the topics that go under each thing. They are definitely not all there, but just like the main areas. Thanks though. That's very important. And especially I feel like during these times, nature, like these difficult times, nature is one of the places that really like gives me a lot of energy and positive emotion, and kind of just this like grounding mindfulness. And here, just as a point, what we mentioned earlier, that flourishing and suffering can go hand in hand. And when we talk about even like emotions, there are a good amount of studies that show that you can, for example, be very sad but feel gratitude at the same time. So we can experience these different kinds of moments and emotions at the same time, and that's extremely important to realize. And it doesn't have to mean, like I said earlier, that we like in positive psychology are trying to force to change something. They can coexist.
And here we have some studies that we have picked regarding this topic as well. So first of all, there has been an extensive review of the results of positive psychology that showed suffering to be a common feature in these studies. So this means that in many studies on positive psychology, we have actually also, or they have actually studied the effects on suffering. And many discussed positive processes help people recover from adversity. And this was a study made by Rusk and Waters in 2013. And also a more recent study by Waters and colleagues in 2021. They have studied the positive psychology during the pandemic. And this study proposes that people can simultaneously experience anxiety and positive mental health. So much, a little bit like Netta just said, that we can have these wonderful positive emotions at the same time as we suffer and experience maybe much more difficult emotions. And the third study was a recent meta-analysis, also done in 2021 or published in 2021, on the effectiveness of positive psychological interventions, so different kinds of ways to actually affect our well-being, different exercises and so on. And this was a large, wide study. There were hundreds of studies included in this meta-analysis.
347 exactly.
Great, thank you.
And from people from 41 countries, so that's also an interesting thing there, that it's sometimes these are very like US specific or so on, but here they had wider audience.
Mm-hmm. And this study found that in addition to all these wonderful well-being effects that we can get from positive psychology interventions, there are also benefits related to stress, to anxiety, and depression. So even though we talk about positive psychology, actually many of these exercises also work during adversity, for example.
And when it comes to these kind of studies that in this first example, especially many of them are even done in like therapeutic settings. So therapists, psychologists who know how to take these positive psychology interventions into their work definitely can use them. And then the studies show that the benefits are good.
And thank you, Anne, for your comment. Emotion self-regulation becomes a major stream in promoting a more positive outlook. Thank you for this, and we're actually going to talk a little bit more about this emotional regulation here very soon. But that's a very good point, and interesting to hear that it's becoming more and more mainstream, so to say. And this is one kind of thought picked up from this positive psychology in a pandemic study by Waters and her colleagues. So they actually identified 3 different positive psychology mechanisms to support mental well-being. So they talked about, first of all, positive psychological interventions buffering our well-being. So in these cases that we are already maybe going through difficult times and so on, we can try to buffer and maybe minimize the effects of these adversities. And also bolstering, so that maybe these adversities will not affect us, even though, as we mentioned, all of us will go through them during our lives. But also they recognized the third mechanism, and that was building. And maybe some of you are familiar with this thought that, okay, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But this kind of was shown in this research as well, that these adversities can also build our well-being and our flourishing. And maybe not immediately, but maybe after some time when we process our adversities and our setbacks that we experience, they can maybe make our sense of meaning clearer. We might, maybe our values get clearer, or we might know what is actually important to us and what we want to spend our time on, or maybe which relationships are the most important, and so on. So there might be these building effects. And in positive psychology, one interesting field of study is post-traumatic growth, which has a lot to do with this building mechanism.
Yeah, resilience in general. That's very, very interesting, and a good study to read if you are interested more about this topic. And here there's a great blog post from Sara Ahtola on Joila's homepage, but unfortunately that's in Finnish. Although nowadays there are all these like extremely good. I think you can just press like the Google automatically translates the whole text and whatever, so you can still try. But here is one quote from her. And Sara is a social psychologist and a crisis worker, and she is one of our positive psychology practitioner students. And in her post, she wrote that we people have an amazing capacity to pull through difficult situations. By resilience, we mean the capacity of people and communities to cope with major changes, disruptions, and crises. These difficult experiences may be combined with empowerment, significant growth, and development. Very well said.
Yes. So now we're going to go through 3 different viewpoints on how to benefit from positive psychology in these difficult times. And our first viewpoint is accepting your emotions and strengthening the sense of security.
And one way to do that is by accepting emotions, being with emotions, understanding emotions, and having tools to affect your emotions in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So express your feelings. Important here is that all feelings are important. They all have an important function. So like mentioned earlier, positive psychology is definitely not only about the positive emotions. It was criticized in the beginning for being that, and that was good criticism, and they had to start from somewhere. But nowadays there's more and more focus on emotions as a whole, and even the fact that we can't always even say if an emotion is like positive or unpleasant. It can be both. Then we can see emotions kind of like children in the way that they want to be seen and heard. So the in that way that like a small child will cry until you take notice of them. Or then of course what people might also do is that we just don't take any notice, and we're stuck. What is the saying in English? There's the saying in Finnish that we just like wipe everything under the rug. We don't like face it or give space to it. But yeah, we could also see another good metaphor is that you can view emotions kind of like as a phone call, that they like the phone keeps ringing and ringing, and you are the one kind of deciding that when are you picking up and how are you facing the emotion, what are you doing with the emotion. And like I talked about the negativity bias in the beginning, we may get stuck on unpleasant feelings and grief. Sometimes they feel so strong, and they do feel stronger than positive emotions. That's like one of the big differences, that positive emotions are very, very like short, and they might just like pass on without you even noticing that you are feeling them. But then the unpleasant feelings might really like feel super strong and kind of take hold on you, and you might get stuck on them. And once again, sadness, emotions like these, they are really important, and it's only when it serves you, or when you are kind of in a need of a change, or in the need of being able to affect the emotion, that you can then use these kind of tools to strengthen the positive as well. But here, the main points when it comes to strengthening the sense of security, when it comes to emotions, is to recognize, acknowledge, and accept your feelings.
And one way to do this is, for example, simply by naming your emotion, because that already kind of brings you the awareness of the emotion and maybe calms you down when you start recognizing and naming these emotions.
Definitely. And one good exercise that we talked about in the Finnish version of this webinar, and somebody was mentioning as well, is just to, mindfulness. We need to be able to be here, be mindful to even recognize and be with the emotion. So just like Paulina said, naming the emotion, but then maybe even first kind of have to be here, like taking a few deep breaths or something to be able to ask yourself, like, what am I feeling? How am I feeling?
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Satu, for your comment. It is more easy and even useful to feel and handle negativity and bad feelings if you learn to canalizing those for useful ways, for sports or art or something. And that is also one way to kind of maybe, what's the word, kind of handle your unpleasant emotions and maybe get some way out for them as well. And as we already mentioned, positive feelings and these unpleasant feelings can coexist. And strategies to increase your happiness and love do not mean that we should close our eyes to fear and sorrow. And as Netta said, kind of push everything under the rug and just try to forget all these unpleasant feelings and things that are going on. And one interesting study was done during the 9/11 terror attacks in the US. They managed to research or study these positive feelings and their kind of effect. And the outcome was that positive feelings played a key role in supporting resilient people against depression after a devastating attack like that. And positive feelings have also been linked to resilience when observing both individuals and also on teams. So also on this group level, we can notice how positive emotions can strengthen our resilience. And here we have one interesting study. Do you want to tell a little bit more about it, Netta?
Yeah, sure. So you can imagine now that you have 2 minutes, and then we're gonna put you on video here in front of everybody, and you are going to give a speech. And now what we are doing is that after we've told you to do this exercise, or that you will do it very soon, is that we will divide you into different groups. And depending on which group you are in, you will be shown a short film. And the first group is shown something that is amusing. The second group is contentment. Then there's this kind of weird, because it's very weird not to get any emotion, but some kind of trying to get a neutral reaction. Like here they are showing like a screensaver or something. And then the fourth group will be shown a video that provokes sadness. And then while doing this, you will be monitored for your blood pressure. And now here you see that what happens is that these two first group who are experiencing more of positive emotions, their blood pressure, it takes much shorter time for their blood pressure to return to normal. And when you look at this group with sadness, it takes a longer time. So this is just to demonstrate that positive emotions, when needed, when there's like a when it serves you, can actually even physically provide you with resilience.
So here we have come to our first mind gym, and we like to talk about mind gyms because a little bit in the same way as you can take care of your body, you can exercise, you can go to the gym or maybe find some other way to exercise and take care of your physical health. In the same way, you can and you should take care of your mind as well. And also you can use maybe a little bit like at the gym, you use different equipment for different muscles. You can also use different exercises for training different areas of your mind and of your well-being. So this is the first exercise for you guys, and we would love to also hear your thoughts. Maybe you can share in the chat. So what kind of things bring you joy and meaning in your everyday life? It would be lovely to hear about them. And I'm just going to quickly point out Caroline's comment here that Freud said that unexpressed emotion don't go away. They are like buried alive and will come back to you in uglier ways. I think he was right about that point.
But yeah, please feel free to share these kind of things that bring you joy on the chat. Satu mentioned the nature earlier, and like I said, that would probably be one of the things that would be on my list for sure.
Mine as well.
And these might look very, very different, and also different depending on what kind of life situation you're in and so on. But oh yeah, there's yin yoga moments. Thank you, Anna-Lena. That's a good one as well. They all are. Satu says reading, writing, sport, having own fun myself. Yeah, that's a great one.
That's great. Yeah, one thing that I have been enjoying lately is there's this great radio program on Friday afternoons, this kind of house party program, and they have these old songs and these kind of funny songs, and then I just start dancing by myself. That's one way that I would bring joy, or I have been bringing joy to myself.
Hey, I love that. I haven't been doing it in a while, but I had this routine where I used to dance every morning and just like, really thinking like dance like nobody is watching kind of way. And it brings so much positive emotion.
And here we have even more of your ways to bring joy. Maria says grandchildren and nature. Thank you. That's a lovely ways. And this is sometimes just breathing is the only thing to be done to feel better and secure at that second. And that is a great way, really great way to just for a moment focus on your breath. Thank you. And then we have Katri, who says nature, music, culture events. And that's great that we can go to those again. Work and family and good food and sports. And then Satu is saying that when I wake up at nighttime because of worries, I just think it is some creative moment and then I solve some of my problems and actually I can sleep after that. Wow, I have to maybe try that next time that happens to myself as well. Thank you for sharing.
And Peter says, scratch my dog and share wet kisses. Yeah, even just looking at my dog's eyes, that's like, yeah, that's a good one. Or one that I can really relate to. Spending time with my family is a source of great joy. Being outdoors and enjoying the warm weather, sun, surf, and super smile, says Anne. Thank you.
Thank you guys for sharing. And also, I think already reading these things kind of brings more positive feelings to myself and kind of imagining and thinking about this. So thank you for sharing. And we put 2 more questions that you can maybe reflect on later. You can take a picture of this slide, for example, and you can think about what could help you to strengthen your sense of security in these times. And also which concrete actions that could strengthen your well-being do you want to remind yourself about, especially during these difficult times? So what kind of actions could you lean on in these difficult times?
And it's really good to have like even a list a physical list, or at least have thought about this in your mind of these kind of things that bring you joy. Some people like to put them like on the fridge or have them on the phone or as a screensaver or whatever it is, so that when you need them, it's like easily available and you can just like look at, okay, because it might be a difficult moment and emotion, and that's not maybe the like easiest spot to be thinking about that, okay, what brings me joy. So if you have these kind of things written somewhere, then you can just like see if something feels good to try in that moment. But like Dipti said, sometimes it can be just like being there and breathing.
Thank you guys for sharing all your thoughts. And maybe if somebody had trouble thinking of something, then you can find inspiration from all these things.
And then we move on to viewpoint 2, which is reflecting on the sense of meaning. And when we went through this frame of flourishing, we mentioned that this might be this whole meaning area here, the second most important, even though these all are kind of tied together and they are all very important. But this is a big one, but it's also one that feels very meaningful and one that we are very interested in.
And experiencing meaning can give protection and give you strength during adversity. It protects you and helps you to overcome stress and trauma and adversity. And the feelings of meaning have also been linked to greater post-traumatic growth. So this that I mentioned before, that maybe if you go through something traumatic, a traumatic experience, you might not immediately experience this growth. And of course it doesn't always happen, but it might happen that when you slowly go through this event and you kind of process it, that after and during and kind of thanks to processing this whole event, you might experience some growth as well. And this is a really interesting study that says that that was conducted during the COVID pandemic. And the finding was that up to 61% of frontline healthcare workers reported growth in their feeling of meaning and purpose, which is quite understandable because they have had a really kind of vital role in combating this pandemic during these times.
Now this dog makes me smile when Pirjo just mentioned that dogs can bring joy, and just seeing this picture is doing that. But okay, so how can we find meaning in the middle of a crisis or a difficult situation? So an interesting thing that research shows is that seeking meaning in the middle of a crisis is not really different from seeking meaning in ordinary circumstances. So there's not a big difference, and means that whatever kind of the situation is, we can still, first of all, kind of decide to seek meaning and be able to find meaning in different types of circumstances. And the approach to meaning by modern psychology has its origin in Viktor Frankl, who some of you might definitely know. He has this book called Man's Search for Meaning, and that's probably one of the books that has made one of the books that made like the biggest impact on me and my life, and Paulina would probably say the same after reading that. So warm recommendation if you haven't read that yet. And well, we'll actually have a quote about this from him later here, but he kind of, if you can say studied, he was on a concentration camp and experienced very, very hard times, obviously. So there was like when we talk about meaning in the middle of a crisis, he was in the middle of it, and when he was looking at people, he could definitely see a difference in the people who were able to find some kind of meaning with their lives, and how that could help them in the middle of this kind of crisis. So that had to do with how well they might survive in a situation as harsh as a concentration camp. And I was seeing here at the same time, Paulina, you'll maybe, oh yeah, okay, so oh my God, I sent pocket messages.
No worries.
A number or something, because there was numbers showing up in the chat. But yeah, no worries at all. Meaning often seems like a question that is either too small or too big. And when mentioned in this frame, when we talk about like meaning, actually in Finnish this is more confusing, but in English we can kind of separate meaning of life and meaning in life. So the question is that what brings meaning to your life? What is meaningful for you? Not the philosophical question that why are we all here and so on. That would be more the meaning of life. And one of the biggest researchers on this field is Michael Steger, Dr. Michael Steger. He has very interesting research articles, and does he have a book? Yeah, right?
Yeah, at least he has been co-authoring several books.
Yeah, so warmly recommend to look up his work if you are interested in this topic. He is also a great guy who we have had the pleasure to meet with Paulina. But he in one of his research articles mentioned these two viewpoints for a meaningful life. And the first one is reflection and active inner life. And the second one is connection with others. And like mentioned, it's sometimes even hard to kind of like distinguish or take apart relationships and meaning, because very often they go hand in hand. But then meaning can also have to do with this kind of other things like religion or spirituality or nature and so on.
And here we have the one quote from Viktor Frankl. He has said that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And like Netta mentioned, he really had to kind of witness this in really, really extremely adverse circumstances.
And some of you might actually also know him as the founder of logotherapy, which is one of the things that was providing him meaning, because he was already at that point when he was taken to this camp, he was like writing a manuscript that then became logotherapy. And yeah, that's a very interesting form of therapy that has to do with meaning in life. So that's something to also research more if this is a field that interests you. And here we have the next mind gym, but this is homework because, like I said, often these questions either feel maybe too small or too big, and these are pretty big questions, so we cannot maybe answer all of them and solve them here in the next minutes. So take a picture of this slide if you want, and take a moment, for example, right after this webinar, where you pause and consider the meaningfulness of life with the help of these questions that are suggested by Dr. Michael Steger. And the questions are that when you think, for example, now about like a difficult situation or a difficult time and the meaningfulness of life in it, what has changed? What has been damaged? What have we learned? Or what have you learned? And what have we gained? What have you gained? And this can bring you some meaningful thoughts and maybe help to see and find the meaning in a difficult situation, and experience more meaning in general. And here are many Finnish people in the webinar, but also for you who aren't. We have this great researcher here in Finland called Frank Martela, who studies this topic of meaning, and And do you remember his book's name in English, Paulina?
No, I can check it really quickly.
And write it in the chat. But he, was it last year or 2 years ago when he published a good book about this topic as well that I would warmly recommend to read if meaning in life interests you. And actually he has also written some research papers together with Michael Steger.
Yes, and the book's name is A Wonderful Life, and I'm just going to put it in the chat as well for all you guys.
Thank you. That was a very hard one to remember. But yeah, so A Wonderful Life by Frank Martela. And that is actually, I want to mention one more thing. If these questions feel like too difficult or big or something, one great tool to use, one great thing to think about is just values. So what are your values and how are they like, how are they kind of showing up in your everyday life when it's difficult, for example? Because then if you are able to do something that is according to your values, you take time to think about them, that might also affect your resilience and bring some benefits during difficult times. So that's another way to go about this meaning piece if this feels too difficult. But then to this maybe more practical feeling tool and third viewpoint from accomplishment, which is practicing self-compassion, one of our favorites.
And self-compassion simply means that you treat yourself as you would treat a good friend. And it might sound simple, but often it is in practice maybe not as simple. Because if I think, for example, in this kind of moment when we're here training together with Netta, and if Netta makes a mistake, then I might not even notice it. Or if I do notice it, then I think like, okay, it doesn't really matter. Maybe nobody noticed, and maybe this makes it more authentic, and just go on and like, it doesn't matter. But if I make the mistake, I might start my own critical voice inside my head might start telling me quite different kinds of stories, like, oh no, Paulina, how could you say that? And I guess like everybody are probably going to leave from this webinar if you continue making these stupid mistakes, and why did you do that? And oh no, it's really embarrassing, and so on. So maybe you recognize these kinds of situations when your own inner critic starts to talk to you in not so supportive ways. But the goal of self-compassion is to slowly change this voice and make it more compassionate towards yourself as well.
And while doing this, being very self-compassionate, so I know there's also a lot of criticism toward this, that, okay, you tell somebody like, oh, just be more compassionate toward yourself. But if you're actually trying to be self-compassionate, remember to have that in the practice, because like Paulina said, yeah, the goal is to get the voice to be more friendly toward yourself, but that's not easy, and it's not always very pleasant, and it can bring a lot of uncomfortable emotions and so on. So just remembering even there to be like, okay, today self-compassion is not trying to be self-compassionate or not forcing it or whatever it is. But anyways, remembering that while practicing actually all of these different tools within positive psychology. I guess that's why that's one of our favorite tools, because you really need it basically for everything.
And here we have the three components of self-compassion that Christine Neff, who is the leading researcher in this area, she has recognized. So first of all, we have self-kindness, and this has to do with what this previous slide just said, that we try to treat ourselves like we would treat a best friend or a good friend. And the second area is, or the component is, common humanity. And it is kind of recognizing that all of us human beings are flawed. All of us make mistakes. All of us go through different kinds of difficulties, and we're not in this alone, even though sometimes it might feel very lonely. Actually, we are part of a greater humanity, and all of us have our own sufferings, our own kind of adversities that we're going through in our lives. And the third component is mindfulness, and this is also a really, really important one, because actually sometimes you might not even notice how you're talking to yourself. And that's maybe, I would say, maybe the first step that you need is to actually start noticing how this inner voice talks to you, how you are talking to yourself. And when you start practicing self-compassion, in the beginning, it might be really hard if you suddenly realize that, okay, have I actually been speaking this in this way to myself already for maybe years and years? So there, again, you need the kind of self-compassion towards yourself, and knowing also that this is very common, and it's very kind of, many of us do this, and it doesn't maybe come naturally to us, to many of us, to treat ourselves like we would treat a best friend. But
according to studies, 80% of us are more critical toward ourselves than toward others. So this is really something that is extremely common, and therefore very needed as well. And I was going to say one more thing about mindfulness, that not only that you recognize the voice, but that you even recognize your suffering. Because if we make a link to the emotions that we were talking about earlier, if we are not mindful, if we're not present, we don't necessarily even recognize how we're feeling. And then it's impossible to bring the aspect of self-compassion there to the situation.
Thank you, Netta. That was a great addition. And we have a question from Satu. Is there some different kinds of treating styles depending if you're introvert, or if you're an introvert or extrovert? And related to this self-compassion, I haven't seen any studies like this, but have you, Netta, seen something related to this?
Not that I can think of now. And there are probably many things. I mean, there definitely might be, and there are probably many things that like many other things than just this, that affects what kind of treating styles there are, and what kind of tools, like what kind of mindfulness self-compassion exercises work for you best, and so on. But not that I can like remember a specific certain study, but it's a very good question.
Mm-hmm. But I would say that self-compassion is definitely something that all of us do benefit from.
Yeah. And then this whole introvert extrovert thing is also interesting, because I guess most of us have both parts, and they might be a little bit in different situations and depending on everything. So yeah, but a good question. Have to look that up. There is quite often people ask that, are there any studies on like this like being self-critical, that if there are differences between women and men. And that I know that there are some studies that are suggesting that it's a little bit more common for females to be self-critical, and maybe in even greater need of self-compassion, but definitely also for both genders.
So what about self-compassion in the face of struggle? Self-compassion protects you from negative effects of suffering, such as anxiety, depression, and stress. And it helps to reduce the adverse effects of stress in the long term as well. And I think this is a really important and interesting point, that self-compassionate people are more willing to experience difficult feelings and to acknowledge their importance. And this might have also these kinds of positive effects. So you are also willing to notice and kind of give space to your suffering and these negative emotions.
And now here, Kristin Neff has quite a new book that's published last year, right? About two different styles of self-compassion. Now, this is something that these both like can just be seen as self-compassion, but self-compassion as a name is often seen as something, especially I think in these Western cultures, that maybe we are like, taking the easy way. We are just like lying on the couch and hugging ourselves, or that it has to do with this kind of like letting yourself go the easy way, and you think that maybe it's a little bit better to motivate yourself by being a bit critical and so on. But here now you can see that there can be tender self-compassion and also fierce self-compassion, which is maybe more dynamic. And when it comes to tender self-compassion, we have things like accepting ourselves to alleviate suffering. So this kind of self-kindness that we show to ourselves, that we are accepting for the suffering and toward ourselves. It's about comforting ourselves. So that could be like what I said, that we are sitting on the couch and hugging ourselves. And seriously, by the way, here is one. Usually people also ask that, can you give us all these tips like how to practice self-compassion? So one way is physical touch. Hold your hand, give yourself a hug. Maybe like, what is this called in English when you like
Stroking.
Yes, thank you. Or whatever it is. This provides a physical reaction in your body and is a form of self-compassion. So pretty easy, but depending on how it feels for you, you can try different ways and find something that works if it works. Then reminding ourselves that we are not alone. So it has to do with that common humanity. We're not alone. There are other people experiencing uncomfortable emotions and situations and suffering. And being present with your own pain. So adding the mindfulness there, feeling your own pain. Whereas then this fierce part of self-compassion, like I said, can be more dynamic. It's about taking action to alleviate suffering. This can be done by kind of like protecting. So you're like drawing boundaries and saying no. Sometimes the greatest form of self-compassion is to listen to yourself, that you're, for example, like, you are not feeling good, you are really tired, there's something going on, and then somebody's asking something from you, and it just wouldn't be a compassionate thing to do toward yourself, that you would be saying yes and doing it. So then just putting these boundaries, saying no. One example. Saying yes to your needs. One of my favorite tools when it comes to self-compassion is asking yourself, what do I need right now? Just what do I need right now? And then trying to actually provide that to yourself. Because if you, once again, when Paulina was mentioning the definition about treating yourself as a friend, if your friend is experiencing suffering, unpleasant emotions, you will probably ask like, hey, how can you help? How can I help you? What do you need right now? So doing the same toward yourself. Because if we are not our own best friends, then yeah, that's often maybe not the case, but extremely important, because that's the longest relationship we have with anybody during our whole life, and maybe the most important in many ways. And then also can be used as this kind of like motivating aspect, so for learning, growing, and even changing the world. And one thing that I want to mention is when there are these kind of difficult times. So, for example, people who work in healthcare have to see a lot of suffering, have to see a lot of unpleasant emotions. So, actually, it's said that you can have something that is called like compassion fatigue, and providing yourself self-compassion can be one of the greatest buffers toward it. So it's it helps. Yeah, I guess it's a bit like when we are in the airplane and they show that, okay, if the air pressure would drop, you put the mask on yourself first and then for others. So just take good care of yourself and try your best to provide self-compassion. It's not always easy. It's definitely not easy. I at least need to practice this like on daily basis, but it's definitely maybe like one of the biggest things that really I can see that makes a difference. And that, like, if I would have to mention one tool from here from positive psychology for difficult times, it would probably be this.
So here we have the last tool and the last mind gym for tonight. How can you show compassion towards yourself? And you can think about either this gentle self-compassion or the firm self-compassion where we set boundaries or provide for ourselves and so on. So this can be also something you can take with you from this webinar. Maybe you can take a picture of this. And of course, if you already have some good ways to do this, you feel free to share with us in the chat. We would love to hear.
And maybe as a recap, some tools are this kind of touching, like holding your hand, also breathing, as mentioned, with the emotions. That's one way of providing yourself self-compassion. And then the question, what do you need right now? Mm-hmm. And Satu says it's actually difficult to separate self-compassion and self-criticism. Thank you for sharing that. It would be extremely interesting to talk more about that. If you want to elaborate on that, you can. Maybe it is one of the most important friendships to keep self-compassion and self-criticism on balance together. Yeah, that's beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to go through a little bit what we have been talking about tonight, we have gone through 3 perspectives to utilize positive psychology in difficult times. First of all, we talked about accepting your feelings and enhancing your sense or your feeling of security. Then we talked about pausing to consider what is meaningful to you. And last but not least, practicing self-compassion. And I really hope that all of you will pick at least one of these things that you will try to take into action in your own life.
And if you already know what it is, please share it so we can see as well.
And now if you have any more questions, any more comments, feel free to add them in the chat and we will answer them here at the end. And Mikko is commenting that listening to inner signals, intuition, and needs. That is, I think, if you are referring to ways to enhance your self-compassion, those are really great ways to do that. To listen to yourself. That is the maybe most important thing, to kind of recognize your own feelings and the situation that you are in.
Any questions? You can still keep them coming if there is something, or like I said earlier, you feel free to contact us later as well. We will provide you some ways of doing that, right? But you can definitely find us on Instagram and Facebook and find our details on our homepage, which I can provide here in the chat.
Mm-hmm. And now feel free to add more comments, more questions, but we're going to really briefly go through our services if you're interested in learning more about positive psychology. So Joilla, we at Joilla help people and communities and organizations to flourish. And we operate online in 3 languages, English, Finnish, and Swedish. And we have training programs and courses for individuals, and also workshops, lectures, speeches, and other customized services for organizations. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to contact us. And we organize also these kinds of free webinars, and we have some earlier, what are those called? Earlier
recordings.
Videos, recordings, thank you, of our webinars available if you go to www.jolla.com/global. Annette also put it for you there in the chat. And if you're interested in workshops, we do different kinds of customized workshops for organizations and according to their needs. And for example, this resilience has been a really popular theme lately, and also strengths, for example, a really popular one, and also meaning in life.
And they all have to do with resilience.
That's true. And we do different lengths of workshops, 1 hour, 3 hours, a whole workday, or a whole series of workshops. And they are feasible at all levels of the organization, all the way to top management. Or we can do this online or at your premises, and as mentioned, in 3 different languages as well.
And here just shortly about our online training programs and courses. So we have this basics of positive psychology course, which is an introductory course on positive psychology. It lasts 3 months and it's currently only offered in Finnish, but we are working on making this in English as well. And we have our positive psychology practitioner course, which is a comprehensive well-being training program. It's provided in collaboration with Finnish summer universities, and it's 8 months long, and also currently in Finnish, but coming in English. And here, like Paulina mentioned, we have some one upcoming free webinar in English that we know of now, and it's going to be about character strengths, which is one of, I would say, our clients' favorite tools, and also ours. And actually, I, at least myself, tie them together with self-compassion in many ways as well. And this one is specifically about character strengths at work, and we are going to host this webinar on Thursday, June 16th. So stay tuned, and you can find more information closer to the webinar from our homepage and also in our upcoming newsletters.
So a little bit like I already mentioned before, I would love for you guys to take at least one of these viewpoints or one thought with you from this webinar. So one more last little mind gym. What is one good thing that was worth coming for? And please feel free to share this in the chat as well. And here is one of our students from our positive psychology practitioner training program, Laura Bratz, who is a customer encounter coach at DNA in Finland. And she has said that positive psychology training with Joilla gave me more than I expected. Theory and tools for my personal life and flourishing, and also tools to apply at work. The most fantastic thing was that to understand that still, after 18 years of my coaching career, I can learn and realize new things that my coaches will benefit from a lot. So thank you, Laura, for these beautiful words. And thank you guys who have been here tonight with us. If you have more comments or questions, now is the last time to do that. Or, as Netta said, you can contact us through the different channels, through our social media channels that we have here. And we would love to connect with you guys on LinkedIn as well. Or you can send an email to, actually, we also have this email address called global@joilla.com, or you can use this info@joilla.com.
And thank you so much for spending this time with us and providing questions and thoughts and being here, being active. Hyvää vappua is Tytti saying we have this 1st of May holiday coming up here in Finland. Hyvää vappua to you too. And I just wanted to say that, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I was just thinking here when we talked about self-compassion and so on, that I really had to use it during this webinar, and it's been a good example of how you can have these different emotions at the same time, because I feel like I'm getting a cold. I'm extremely tired, but at the same time I'm excited, and it's nice to be able to share this time with you and talk about these important topics. So thank you for that.
And we had one more question here from Caroline. What should one do with forbidden feelings? For example, being in love with someone that is married. That is a very good question. And first of all, this forbidden feelings feels like a difficult thing, because if you try to push something under the rug, as somebody wrote here before, that Freud already had said that it will come back and kind of haunt you even if you try to push it under the rug. So I would say that at least this self-compassion is probably one thing that you can definitely use in this kind of situation that is not easy at all. I don't know if you have something else to add, Netta.
No, that would probably have been my main answer. A very good question once again, and a good like point, or something I started thinking about immediately when you mentioned, Paulina, forbidden feelings. That and you have this in this, what are these called?
Brackets.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So like what even are forbidden feelings in that way, that being compassionate, that feelings are feelings, and it's not like easy for us to be in charge and deciding what kind of feelings we are feeling. So in a way, I guess all kinds of feelings are normal, all kinds of feelings are information, just being self-compassionate and accepting. But I mean, this is not easy, like you mentioned already. It's definitely not easy.
All right, but thank you all guys for being here tonight. Hope to see you in our next webinar as well, and have a great Vappu and 1st of May, all of you guys, and have a great evening or the rest of the day.
Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you on June 16th. Bye-bye.
Bye.